Hey listeners, it's Paul Andriola here. Why not join our community at Small Cap Discoveries, where we offer our members direct access to some of the best microcap investment opportunities available. Our members are getting access to premium microcap financings, research reports, and direct access to management. Sign up today at www.smallcapdiscoveries.com.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Small Cap Discoveries conference call. Today on our call, we have Randy Buchamer, the CEO, and Michael Ciosi, the VP of Sales and Marketing of Legend Power Systems. Legend Power trades on the TSX Venture under the symbol LPS and in the US under LPS-TSX.V. The company is trading at 84 cents with roughly 102 million shares outstanding, or about an $86 million market cap. I'd now like to hand it over to Paul Andriola.
Hey, great. Thanks, Trevor. Happy to have Randy back. We've also got Michael here for the first time, so happy to have both here representing Legend Power. For our subscribers and listeners, reminder that Legend, we met up with Legend about 10 months ago, back when the stock was only 30 cents. The stock hit a high recently of 96 cents for roughly a 200% move in that time frame. So obviously we want to catch up, find out what's driving this. Randy, why don't we start by just giving us, a little brief summary of what Legend Power does, and we'll get into a bunch of questions.
Sure, thank you, Trevor and Paul. We really look at, there's two legends. There's the legend before and there's the legend today. And it's interesting that we spoke, 9-10 months ago, because we've made a lot of progress on the transition to the newer legend. So to step back for one moment, what Legend was, inherently, it took the problem that the utilities, the grid had, of delivering too high a voltage to commercial customers into their businesses. And that was because the technology the utilities use is dated. And there's different reasons why, but voltage dissipates the further it goes away from a transmission station. And that's important because if you're close to the station, you've got a higher voltage. If you're at the end of the transmission line, you've got a lower voltage. So you would waste energy. You would have your equipment run hotter, and your repair and maintenance costs would be higher. And thirdly is that you would have the longevity of your products and the pumps and different things in your building not last as long because of the voltage. So summary was, we were in the business of helping customers reduce their voltage to optimize it to the level their building works best at for their appliances. What we found was that we were very much doing a lot of deals where we would do one pilot, it would last multi-years, and get a second order because we had to prove it out. And the good news now is we're well over 300 systems in the field. We don't have to do that anymore. So the transition came because we were dealing with people in the electrical room, operational people, and we were really into an energy savings payback model, competing not with a direct competitor, but with the HVAC systems, window treatments, lighting, etc. We wanted something more compelling, and we wanted to move from dealing with people in the electrical room to people in the executive suite. So the switch, and it's really been over the last year, we introduced our Insights product, which does assessments on buildings for $1,500. Instead of having to spend $100 and waiting for multiple pilots over multiple years, we can look at 20, 40, 100 buildings for $1,500 a building and come back with a detailed power report, which highlights not only the energy you were saving before, but with our new platform, addresses a lot of the power challenges that companies have in their buildings. So it moved us from just the ROI payback to being more strategic and moving us to the executive room, because we're dealing now with questions on ESG, carbonization, electrification plans, how to improve the tenant experience, how to reduce capital budget expenditures, R&D, et cetera, for different parts of the building. What is happening in your building that's adversely affected by power, and we can improve that. What we have found since we've made that change, and we will have, I guess the last 6 weeks, we've had a lot of demonstrable releases out, showing how quickly the business has responded to Insights as an assessment. We set the first quarter that we would do 40 assessments. That's fiscal, September to December. And December on, the first quarter, we went and said, we'll do 90 Insights. and we've hit our targets. The neat thing is it really makes the model easy to understand, because for every 2 insight assessments we do, that leads to about 1 SmartGate platform, about $110,000. So for every 2 insights we do, we get 1 SmartGate sale. And the nice thing about it is we know that that leads to $1,500 to $4,500 of new recurring revenue stream, which we didn't have last time we spoke to you. And the insights that we use for the assessment, that tool gets moved as a temporary tool, an assessment charge, goes into the SmartGate platform and is in the system to be used on an ongoing basis for many years, and provides data and information on what's happening in their buildings for executives to make better decisions. I'll let Mike add some examples of that and some real life customer examples, but I will preface by that is the fundamental shift from being a product-based company that was pushing a product out, pushing the sale to the electrical room. And the fundamental shift is we have a platform that is ongoing, being updated and enhanced to address the needs that customers have. We put an entry-level tool in to do an assessment so you don't have to buy the product to prove it out. And it has really, really worked. Volumes are growing, business is growing. And as you can see from the releases we've had out, and we'll continue to have over the next while, we're really excited about where it's going. Mike?
Absolutely, Randy. And again, Randy hit the nail on the head. We're on a major inflection point. If you go back just a couple of years, what our platform does today is dramatically different than it did just a few years ago. Yes, we still control, regulate voltage, but we do it more powerfully, quite frankly. It's pun intended, right? Because what we're able to do is not only bring voltage down, but also bring voltage up as well. And that gives that ideal operating environment. And that really gives us the ability to do a lot more for our customers, to drive a lot more value for them. In addition, when we look at the insights, what the insights really does is it gives us full visibility to the major areas that our customers care about. It's their energy efficiency. It's the lifetime of their equipment. It's the reliability of the equipment that they need to satisfy the people that depend upon the building. And what we've done is we've taken all of our research as well as a lot of the industry available research, and we've created a model. And that model is serving as a bridge from the electric room to the boardroom, as Randy indicated. Because what that allows us to do is be able to show how the energy that's coming in, the electricity that's coming in the building, reduces your life expectancy of your $600,000 chiller. Instead of lasting 20 years, it's going to last 12. If you own a building, you want to know about that. We're able to show that because of the fluctuation and the instability on the grid, you are experiencing 3 to 4 times the number of service calls and costs because of just the sheer volume that are coming into your building, in addition to the energy waste. So when we look at those, what's becomes very interesting to us is that these are prevalent everywhere, these issues. When we look at it, at the buildings that we've assessed, somewhere between 10 and 20% fall into the good range, which means that there's negligible impact. Conversely, 20 to 30% fall into the critical range, and the balance of the 80 and 90% fall into the caution range. So what that tells us is that there's a big problem everywhere. And not only does that open up a great need for Legend, but it also really, and when we layer into that the insight-led sales approach, it really opens up new markets for us. When we look at the fact that traditionally we've been direct selling, if you go back a couple of years, we were focusing on Ontario education. Now with the insights-led sales process, what we're able to do is focus on multiple markets across commercial real estate, from multifamily to office space to industrial, hospitality, retail, to just straight industrial, government, education, K through 12. So from a direct sold standpoint, we have a much bigger field to roam in. So that's working out quite well, in addition to having a much more powerful story. But what that's also done is that's created a lot of interest in what we do with some of the third parties, some of the channels. And that's been a really big key for us, because that's really opening up the channel sales market is is again a game changer for us. When we look at some of the channel sales that we're working with, there's a segment of companies that are called ESCOs. If those of you who are not familiar with an ESCO, it's an energy services company. What they do is they bundle energy conservation measures into a performance contract for public sector, for governments and school boards and those types. That right there is a $10 to $15 billion a year business. And we changed the game for them. For years, they have been swapping this light bulb for that light bulb, this HVAC for that HVAC. And we're a net new measure for them. So when they bring a net new measure that increases their energy savings, we help them win more. Not only do we help them win more, but we help every measure they're putting in last longer. So that helps protect their margins. So when you can go into a net new market that's $10 to $15 billion a year and explain to them you can help them win more business by increasing the energy savings and increase their profitability and ensure that they hit the margins for their investors, that's again game changing, again on the $10 to $15 billion market. So what that also does for Legend is it really gets us into a scalable sales environment, because now instead of having to go out and hire 1,000 sellers to go talk to all of those, we can leverage the thousands of sellers that are working for those channel partners. So it's been absolutely game changing from the standpoint of what the insights and what the success has really enabled for us. When you also layer into that the macro changes, we're all looking at decarbonizing and electrifying everything, and we're moving from gas heat to electric heat, gas vehicles to electric vehicles, and all that's going to increase our demand. But the challenge is that the utilities plan on meeting that demand rather than with traditional fossil fuels, with renewable sources like wind and solar. What more and more people are becoming aware of is that wind and solar have a dramatically different power profile than traditional generation sources. And that dramatically different power profile means a lot more instability. And that lot more instability means more problems for the buildings and the people that live in them, that work in them, that depend upon those buildings. So what we're saying is that when you look at the fact that we're doing more and more, there's studies out there, that there's estimates out there that show that we're going to spend between $3 and $3.5 trillion a year for the next 20 to 30 years doing two things: taking carbon out of our economies and stabilizing our electric grid, because one affects the other, and you have to level the playing field on that. So we're ideally situated to really have a very profound impact on the buildings, upon the grid, upon the people that depend upon the buildings, and that entire industry. And to the point where there's an independent third-party white paper that was written back in February that we can make available to everybody, but they call it active power management at the grid edge, where they looked at it and they looked at active power management, which is what Legend SmartGate does. And they say that that active power management is the first thing you should do when you're looking at doing any type of building electrification or building decarbonization, because of the fact that it absorbs and it mitigates all of the risks that are inherent with those types of technology changes. And they went on to say that they see active power management platforms being as commonplace in large commercial buildings as electric meters.
Wow.
Every building has an electric meter. So from the standpoint of a massive market opportunity, we're incredibly well positioned. And when you layer into that the fact that we don't have any direct competition, it's again, we're at a very, very, very exciting place for sure. So there's just a couple of additional things that I wanted to add in.
Fantastic. I want to take this minute just to remind everybody that's listening. We want to try to make today as interactive as possible. So please, if you have any questions, just use the chat function and fire away. I'll do my best to ask Michael and Randy your question. What do we, so you guys now have obviously, the last year has been pretty successful in you guys getting these new insights out there, getting contracts, getting really some good solid traction, and probably more important, getting a lot of data. what kind of paybacks are you seeing now in sort of real time, real world, and how is that helping you get your next set of clients? Because you've obviously got data to work with now as opposed to just theory, right?
Yeah, I'm going to let Mike give you the exact numbers of how he would present the payback to a customer, because he's got 3 areas. But I'm going to take you to the bigger part of the question, which is we're not just payback anymore. That's a fundamental shift. That used to be all we had.
Right.
What we do is, yes, we can improve the life of the equipment. Yes, we can make your products last longer. Yes, we can reduce the energy. But we can do so much more. We can help with your tenant experience, with your write-offs in business, with our technology and the way that it works and the way we help tenants in a building. Governments give you the ability to raise rents beyond a certain cap level because you have invested and you are helping out, which increases the revenue, decreases the costs on the other side. So we're creating additional profitability for building owners. It allows us to building owners, especially on the commercial side, to get attractive rates for investment, for capitalization. They get a reduced rate because products like ours are doing the right thing and hitting a lot of their corporate goals for the decarbonization, electrification, et cetera. And also, with insights, we haven't really touched on the value of that to a large degree. Yes, it does the assessments, but we get all that information in, and we can proactively help businesses make decisions with their data. And think about it, also the ecosystem, whether you're an ESCO or whether you are a building owner, we can tell you what's happening in other buildings like yours, in other regions, et cetera, to do benchmarking. And the other point, and I'll turn it over to Mike to answer, is that whole side of the payback is what we used to have, but we have so much more that we can help the executives make decisions. Having an assessment of insights before I buy buildings. I can run those for $1,500 a building that are hundreds of millions of dollars worth of buildings, and know what the power impacts are before and what the cost will be to improve it. So now we're a proactive tool before you even make a business decision. Also, if I'm looking at where my capital expenditure should go into what buildings, I can use insights as a tool to make those decisions. And thirdly is, which building should we divest of? Well, the first question you have, how much capital has to go into the buildings to increase the rents? And where's the line where it doesn't make sense and we should sell it off? All those things are beyond payback. So that's the message I really wanted to give. And I'll turn it over to Mike. We're so much more than just what's the payback. Mike?
Yeah, absolutely. Spot on, Randy. We are definitely much more than a simple payback. I think a good way to kind of paint a good picture of that. We're working with a customer who, when we first started engaging with them, we told them that their $100,000 investment would generate $15,000 worth of energy savings, and so that put it to you can do the math and figure out what that payback was, and we were a little ashamed of that at first, but they came back and they enlightened us that they were spending $100,000. Well, off that $100,000. They were going to do accelerated depreciation, which was going to save them $30,000 in taxes right off the bat. So that 100 became 70. Then they got a $15,000 incentive from the utility. So that 70 now becomes 55. So then they save their $15,000 in energy and another $25,000 on maintenance and repair costs. And they are also able to go ahead and increase the revenues of the facility by another $25,000. So when we were originally thinking that this was going to be an 8 or 9 year payback, they're sitting there looking at it saying this is about a year and a half. So that's one of the things that we do, is we really make sure that we stress the overall picture of what it is that we can do, because not only is it an expense control, but it's a revenue impact. We have another customer who tells us this has lowered their cost of capital because they now have an implemented ESG strategy that the SmartGate is part of. In fact, I was talking to someone who's in charge of portfolio development for a major organization in North America last week, and he said that he's never going to buy another building without running an insights assessment on it. simply because of the fact that they're going in, buying the buildings that are 10, 12 years old, thinking that the systems are going to last 20 years and that they're not going to have any problems and that they're going to be able to service the customers to generate that revenue. But those systems may be on the verge of dying, and we're able to give them the insight on what that really is, what's really happening. So it really the insights has been absolutely game changing for our business, because it really gives them a true, accurate picture. And again, when it comes down to a simple payback, when we explain to someone that their $600,000 chiller isn't going to last 20 years, it's going to last 12, it's going to last 14 years. How do you factor that into a simple payback discussion? So, and again, when you look at if you invest all of this money into making your buildings safe and have the latest filtration systems and scanners and everything along those, all this high tech equipment to make it safe for people to come back in the building, if you have voltage swells and transients and those types of things that cause that equipment to malfunction, it's the same as not having it. So that's really where it's been game changing for people to realize that the high tech equipment that they depend on to run their businesses, it's a good way to think of it is you would not operate a data system today without a firewall, because the firewall protects you from the perils of the grid. I'm sorry, the perils of the internet. And that's really what SmartGate does, is we protect the building systems from the perils of the electric grid. So it's been a very fun journey so far.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Let's talk a little bit about the actual contracts. Now, you mentioned you guys get paid recurring revenue, but give us a sense, like big buildings, small buildings, how do you price a specific building? How long are your contracts? Give us a sense. I imagine it's all monthly recurring revenue. What can you tell us about that line?
Yeah, so there's a couple things that go into it. First of all, we are set up for a capital purchase. So that from a capital purchase standpoint, there's the cost of the equipment and the installation for that capitalized cost. And then again, that can run anywhere from $50,000 to $250,000, depending upon the size of the building, the scope of the installation, and those types of considerations. From a recurring revenue standpoint, because of the fact that now we have, again, all of the insights data, the people are going to want to have access to that on an ongoing basis for a number of reasons. That not just part of their ESG strategy to be able to see exactly what's happening, but also just to manage the risk and manage all of the demand for the building. Incorporate it into their all of the data into their IoT strategies. So that data starts at $1,500 a year. And then because of the fact that we have a heritage of innovation, we have a variety of different maintenance subscription plans that go up to $4,500 a year that people can subscribe to. That also gives them the ability to be able to add future capabilities that Legend comes up with to their platform, either on a subscription basis or on another capital purchase basis.
And I just would add to that because the platform is upgradable, future-proof, that is something that we can do, as Michael said. But the existing customers we have today, we can upgrade their equipment and bring it up to the latest version. So you're looking at systems now that some have been out over 10 years. They can come to be as current as one that was bought, last week, very quickly by us. And the last point I would just add is that we will be this year introducing some models that will eliminate the CapEx component of the purchasing decision and make things easier for people that may not have the CapEx budget for the calendar year to acquire equipment on a basis that would be simply a monthly recurring fee.
Right. Gotcha. Why don't we dive into some of the contracts you guys have announced? Because I know recently you landed your largest contract in the company's history. Why don't we get some flavor and color around some of these contracts?
Sure. Just start with, I think if I recall, it was January 19th, we announced the largest deal in the company's history. And in the last couple of weeks, we beat that again. So that's what you're starting to see with insights-led sales, is we're getting bigger orders, multiple billings, 10, 20 at a time. So that's the great news there. I mean, we're really finding that the switch has gone from the education market in Ontario to multi-diversified channels in both Ontario and the US. We're starting to see much more uptick and approval in US deployments for insights and also smart gate platforms. Some of the deals we've announced are in the multi-residential marketplace. In fact, the last two that we've done are Ontario-based companies that have been great supporters of ours. One has over 30 systems of ours, and the other will have over, I guess, in the range of about 15 to 20. So we're really seeing that deployment accelerate. Mike?
Yeah, and one of the other things to add on to that, again, just from an activity metric for insights, is we have a goal of 90, and 90 should lead to 45 insights. And what's interesting is that some of the that's at a 50% conversion rate. What we're actually finding is with existing customers, that's much higher. We've seen that as high as 100%. So from the standpoint of some of the deals that we've announced recently, that there's definitely some high points there from the standpoint of multiple record-setting deals, as well as very high conversion rates on the insights. It's also noteworthy to mention that we have an agreement with the city of New York. That can't be we can't possibly overstate that, right? It's a phenomenal opportunity in front of us. The DCAS group that runs all of the citywide administrative services for the city of New York has chosen Legend to demonstrate our capabilities with the public schools in New York, and that gives us thousands, over 4,700 buildings to work with the city of New York on. So again, you look at the multiple sectors, the multiple geographies. We've also mentioned wins on the ESCO side of the house. We have an awful lot of traction, an awful lot of things going on that are very exciting.
And I would just add, we're finding now things that we didn't look at before. Water treatment plants. Some of the ESCOs have written us into military deals, Department of Defense. We had no access to those previously, nor did we include those in our total addressable market for the North America. Those are only growing for us. And with the ability for us to correct common power problems, the whole industrial market's opening for us up, Paul. So you're going to continually see announcements with wins that you're going to go, boy, I didn't know they were doing that in that market. We got a lot more of those to come over the next while.
That's great. That's great. So these deployments, typically, how long does it take to get a system up and running? And when do you guys get paid? You get paid something up front and then sort of, on completion, or maybe answer those two pieces there.
It will vary. Historically, we dealt from weakness because we were in pilots, always trying to prove things out. So quite honestly, the customer said, here's how we're going to do it. We said, okay. Now we find is, we effectively will take deposits down and effectively from a cash flow point of view, we don't put out cash other than our cost of equipment on a sale, which is important because we use in-market installation partners that can do that on a variable basis as opposed to a fixed cost. So if that's 30,000 of the 110, we don't pay that until we get paid. And of the remaining 70, 80,000 on a system, we only have to put about $25,000 of that as far as working capital deployed, which is always important because a lot of companies that are so much more working capital intensive. So we've got some great leverage there, which is important. The other side of it is that we continue to see our models change. We used to be, as I said, does it work and prove it out. Now it's, does it work for me? And I think Mike can add to this. What we're finding is our sales cycles are getting much shorter with insights. The deal that we announced last week, our new largest deal, from start to finish was completed in 60 days. We used to talk about multiple years. So again, the largest order in the company's history was done in 60 days. Wow. And 100% conversion rate between insights to smart gates. and you will see repeat press releases of that nature with that message is what we're seeing in the marketplace. So it's been very interesting from that perspective, but the adoption rate increases, and our ability to get the contracts done on a timely basis, on a basis of a contract that works for us, has really shifted over the last while for us.
And do you guys announce any sort of backlog? And do you announce every order, or how do you how can an investor get a good idea of where you guys stand in terms of bookings?
This is a debate I have with people in the market all the time. We're an operating company, and we've got people watching us, and if we put too much out, people can leverage that in negotiations against us as a small company. Second is, we've got big companies out there that look at the marketplace, and I don't want to go and write, come after us on our foreheads. So another reason I mentioned that is there's a push and pull between the operational company and the public company. So what we decided to do was, people said, but how do we know you're really growing? How do you know you're hitting these targets? So what you're going to see this week is our first quarterly summary. And what it's going to be, rather than wait 45 days after the quarter to have a discussion about Rev Rec and all those financial numbers, we're going to talk to you within 3 weeks at the end of each quarter about what business we booked, what was the dollar amount of business you booked in the quarter, did you hit your 90 insight target, yes or no, those kind of things. So an investor can very quickly look at that and say, oh, they're hitting their numbers and the business is growing. That will not include backlog, but intuitively, if someone adds up the book business per quarter, they can pretty quickly say, I know what the backlog is. But that is simply from a competitive point of view, we want to leave that out. But we're going to include a lot of information. That release will be out in the morning, actually, first thing. And there's a lot of good news in it.
Yeah, that's great. I think that that should cover off a lot of the questions that investors have ongoing. Obviously, when we last spoke, I can't remember exact month, but COVID, right? We've been, enduring a year of COVID. How is that affecting your business? What, if any, opportunities does it present? And what does it look like going forward for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I would say there's a couple points. First is that we're seeing people who operate buildings much more concerned about safety, Paul. They've got very sensitive equipment for COVID or for safety in a building. And the last thing you want as a building owner is for people to come back and get sick, and that would be publicly addressed, and you're known as a bad building. So we're finding that people are much more sensitive to saying, I'm putting all this sensitive equipment in. How do I make it work properly? How can I ensure my buildings are safe? So that's the first thing we've seen from COVID. We have seen some delays in people putting equipment into things because of shutdowns. That has happened at different cycles during the COVID pandemic. But I would say generally you've got people that we're not getting any no's out there because of COVID. We're saying some people want to wait or defer a little bit because of buildings, but generally it's been very positive. When you look at the announcements this week and you see the financial, the business summary for the quarter, you'll see that our business has upticked nicely. So it actually it affected us for the first part, as it did all businesses. But when you went through that first 6 months from March, we're starting to see some significant pickup demonstrably from September on, significantly.
And if I remember correctly, going through the numbers, you guys have a healthy balance sheet, no real debt to speak of. You get some cash. Any need for further capital right now, or how do you see that in the near future?
Yeah, no, the balance sheet is good for the business we have today. Absolutely. We get asked at different times, would you raise capital? Well, number one is we would never do it at a valuation that the cost of capital is too high. So now that the market's starting to appreciate where we're going, and the market is reflecting that with an increase in our valuation, that opens up possibilities down the road. So maybe the best way to answer your question is, Paul, we're not doing that today, but what would make us do that? When you start dealing with these huge organizations, the ESCOs that have thousands of salespeople covering North America, they're going to want to see a bigger balance sheet, a more substantive balance sheet, to show that we can handle the larger orders. And we used to get the onesie twosies, now we're getting the dozens at a time. Well, I don't think it's gonna be too much longer before we have 100 system clients per year. And they're gonna wanna make sure we've got the stability and the capability to deliver on that. So at some point we'll have to address that. And secondly is, when you look at that model we talked about, for every 2 insights assessments we do 1 smart gate sale. So intuitively you go, if you can keep converting at a 50% ratio, then the model says, how do you get your insights out? Because if you can go 90 to 200 to 1,000 a quarter, and you keep at least your 50%, you do that with channels. And that will mean that at some point, what we will do is add to the balance sheet to really run and develop the channels, as Mike was talking about earlier, the ESCOs, the resellers, et cetera, because they can give us thousands of salespeople on the street without us having that high cost of sales, setting up regional offices. However, it changes us. We become the category expert and support those people. And it means we have to have the proper training and proper videos and support from that perspective. That's a change you'll see. So the answer to your question is, not today, we're sufficient, but from an appearance, from a sustainability and capability point of view, we'd want to balance our balance sheet at some point. And secondly is the ability for us to go and rapidly expand beyond just organic growth on the business. That would also be attractive at some point.
So you sort of mentioned that the sales model a little bit could be a pinch point. What other pinch points, if anything, are there? What's preventing you from really unleashing this? And clearly, I mean, one of the questions I'm going to ask you is about the total addressable market, but in my mind, it's absolutely massive. How do you go and just attack this thing? What other things do you need?
Well, it's the problem is the market's pretty small. It's only 38 billion, so we're a little concerned about that. But with all sincerity, you know, I wouldn't say sales is a pinch point. It's a real leverage point, because we're starting to get the resellers turned on to how they can create revenue in their core business, but also create differentiation and increase their value proposition in a way without a direct competitor. So Mike talked earlier about the ESCO that we announced that we did the schools with. Well, for example, they won that business. That's a public document. Their competitors look at and want to know, well, what the hell was this Legend Power product that went in that they won the business with? So we've had a lot of activity from those people. So we're really pleased that we're going to have the sales representation. The pinch point is making sure you don't disappoint people once you make a sale, Paul. And that means you've got to make sure there's good quality of the product, it does what you say, and the installation and support to your channels is excellent. And those are the areas that we are not concerned about, but they're the areas we need to get better at, because it's a different model than going direct that we had historically.
Right. No, fair enough. And sort of manufacturing capacity or any the hard sort of assets that you have to put together. How do you deal with that? Where do you make it? You know, do you have capacity if all of a sudden you had a big influx of orders? What can you tell us about that?
Well, we welcome the opportunity. We've had that lately. But, you know, we can do $30 million worth of equipment in our Vancouver operation. We use best-in-class partners, and we don't do the manufacturing. We get boards made, computer boards made externally. All the Intel, the patents, the engineering is all done on those internally. So we use best-in-class partners. We assemble a product. We can assemble anywhere in region. So what we'll reach, Paul, I believe, is before we want to do the 30 million in Vancouver, it'll make sense to produce the product in the US closer to the new growth markets, because it'll save us shipping up product, duties, and then shipping it back as a finished goods. And most of the product now we design so that it is made in USA regardless, so that we have that capability if that was to tighten up under Biden. You know, there is not, again, a significant working capital requirement in the organization, and we do not have any extravagant CapEx issues. When you've got a warehouse that can be set up in a matter of a month, you probably have about $100,000 for tools and different things, and it's unskilled labor that does the assembly. So we're not like some organizations where they need a particular environment or something. It's very costly from a CapEx point of view. So we like where we're at, and the growth side of it is great. And because we've got that leverage of that $25,000 with a working capital on a $100,000 sale, we can do a lot with that. And you can factor that. People have talked to us all the time about factoring that working capital. We haven't yet. And with some of the SaaS models with partners, we feel good about where we're at with that too.
Awesome. You guys ready for some questions from the audience?
Absolutely.
Let's do it. Okay, let's start here. Okay, so it says they suggest, meaning you guys, they suggest no direct competition. Okay, so where is the competition? And he goes on to say, in his opinion, there's always competition. I mean, just status quo is competition, right? What else can you say to it?
Well, that might get specific into names and things. He'll refer to that white paper that he was talking about. But before he does that, you know, we created this market. The competition was no one knew who you were, didn't know if it worked. And as a decision maker, it was risky to support Legend. So we had to go through that whole cycle of the marketing before you sold, pilots and everything else. We're through that now. People don't ask whether we work because we have enough demonstrable success and testimonials. What they ask whether it works for them. So what we find, and with the ability to insights and do the assessment, we can help them go through that process and understand the impact and how valuable our product is for them. But our previous example, we didn't have direct competitors. We had substitute competitors in the category, the other energy saving options you have, from changing out your lighting, changing your HVAC, updating your windows, etc. And that was where one of your very first questions was payback. Why we got out of that, Paul, because it was really roll the dice. What's your number? 3.2-year payback. Oh, well, Windows is 3.1. We'll go with them this year. That was the problem, because you only got so much addressable budget each year. But with the enhancement and the evolution of our product and our value proposition, we do not have a direct competitor does what we do. Now, when someone goes, okay, can you prove it? Yeah, I can. We're winning business like IKEA Canada. They went out RFP worldwide. IKEA went worldwide out of Sweden. We won the business. They came back and said, no one does what you do. People do portions of what we do, but we are the conductor of the orchestra of all the instruments in your building, the apparatus, etc. People play the instruments themselves, but we are the one category that looks after all the instruments in the building. And in that white paper report, I'll turn over to Mike, but there was 3 quasi-competitors, quite different than Legend. I'll let Mike tell you that.
Yeah, it was definitely a well-done white paper, and I think it's available on the deck. It was from a group called the Emergent Group. What they looked at though was pretty interesting, because when you look at the active power management space, there's different features and functions that need to happen. You know, it's not just if you go back again to what Legend originally did by bringing voltage down. Now, by being able to bring voltage down, bring voltage up, do full voltage regulation, do it on a phase-by-phase basis. Now we're doing so much more than we had done previously. It puts us into a different category. And the way that we do this, the way that we the topology that we use focuses on solving 95% of the issues and saving energy. And that's the big difference. And I think that's what the white paper does a nice job of showing. There are other products out there that solve for voltage regulation, but they do it in a way that is overkill to the point where it's so big it doesn't fit in the building. Mm-hmm. What's the point in having a piece of equipment if it's bigger than the electrical room it's supposed to go in? And that's really the big differentiator. You know, or conversely, that, you know, when you're looking at it from trying to do it for a particular piece of equipment, that gets to be very prohibitive, because now all of a sudden you're having to do, you know, all of these mini projects just to cover off a building, where Legend can come in at the ideal size, at the ideal point, with the ideal coverage that solves the issues in a way that actually saves energy. One of our clients put it from the standpoint that we are a resiliency measure that pays for itself with energy savings. And that was a very intuitive way to look at it. You know, we've had another customer that said that we are the biggest innovation to hit the electric room since electricity. And I thought that was another bold one, right?
That's bold, yeah.
Because at the end of the day, if you look at Schneider, you look at Power Science, you look at UST, they have some of them have very complete solutions, but no energy savings. Some of them have complete solutions, but they're really small, and they just cover a design for a particular piece of equipment versus the whole building. And that's where they say we have no competition from the standpoint that we have the whole building. We solve the most important issues that affect the longevity of equipment and protect the equipment from the lifetime and reliability standpoint, but we also save energy in the process. So that's the big difference. Yes, there are competitive options out there, but you could certainly call a Mack truck a competitor to the Honda Civic because they both have engines and wheels, but at the same point in time, they're nowhere close, and that's really what it comes down to for us.
And I would just add, Paul, to that 2 points. One is our customers tell us, and trust me, they're looking for competition to beat us up on price, and they're not seeing it. It does. I think the second part of the question from the person who asked it would be, well, competition's coming. You guys, what's going to happen? Where's your barriers to entry? If I could just take 30 seconds on that.
Mm-hmm.
This industry, I was related to a heart doctor. You can have the pills and you can walk in tomorrow. You're not going to get anyone in the street to take a heart pill unless their doctor's approved it. The doctor's not going to approve it unless you've got the efficacy and all the phase trials that you have to show it works. We've gone through it now for 8-9 years. I don't care who you are out there, the utilities, the electronic contractors, and engineers, there's a huge barrier to entry to prove your product out over multiple clients over multiple years before you can even come to the market. We've dealt with people like Schneider, done joint deals because they couldn't solve the customer's problem. In fact, IKEA Montreal actually has a Schneider Legend solution in its store. They did, I think it was about a $4.5–5 million electrical contract. They put a $250,000 Legend unit in that says Schneider on it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the best way I can explain it to you.
Yeah, it's a good validation for sure.
Yeah.
Let's jump to the next question here, and maybe you guys will know what this means, but can they talk about microgrid and potential impacts? Make any sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so when you're looking at microgrids, obviously we have a very strong play in a microgrid environment, because with microgrids, what you're doing is you're taking all different types of distributed energy resources and you're deploying them towards a building. Now, we know that when you have one power source, you've got stability issues, but now all of a sudden, when you've got 2, 3, 4 different power sources coming into a building, you have that many more chances for instability. So from the standpoint of our value in a microgrid environment, it's incredibly high. And we've actually seen one of our customers actually bought a smart gate because they had about $1 million solar solution installed that they couldn't use. Because what happens is that the voltage coming in from the grid was actually lower than their solar was producing. So as a result of that, they couldn't actually get their solar system to turn on. So what we were able to actually do is turn the voltage down from the grid that allowed the solar to turn on and actually be able to flow. So from the standpoint of microgrids, they're very symbiotic. Legend is very symbiotic in that scenario. And the other thing to keep in mind is that, again, I think I covered it off earlier, but when you're looking at distributed energy resources like wind and solar, they have a dramatically different power profile. And that dramatically different power profile is very unstable. And we are even more important in a situation where you've got multiple distributed energy resources feeding a particular building, because we take all of that greater instability that happens with those and we insulate the building from that. All of the systems, all the people that depend upon those systems, the finances of the firm are all protected when you've got a smart grid on site.
And again, I would say what I said twice earlier, If you don't believe what we're saying, customers are buying our product because of the problems they're having with all the different new distributed energy that's out there. And again, that conductor of the orchestra, that becomes that key piece, that catalyst that we are to make sure everything works together.
Yeah.
It's
amazing how, you know, so much about electricity, you'd think as a layman, electricity is electricity, but there's so much factors involved that change electricity you're getting. I find this fascinating right now.
Yeah, and Paul, you know, it's just one point I was going to add is I think that's one of the big things we do is with insights, we take all that data and turn it into information and put it into a very executive-friendly report because of what you just said. And what they've been used to getting is some electrical engineering firm give them all these graphs and everything else. And they look and go, what does this tell me?
Yeah.
The power impact report, we change everything into, but here's how it impacts your building in easy English so that people don't have to have a degree or an engineering degree. They can read it and go, I understand this, makes total sense.
Yeah, fascinating. Okay, so I've got a question around, well, New York City. You mentioned New York City and the number of buildings. What do you see as the addressable market size there in New York?
The addressable market in New York is absolutely massive. When we look at government buildings as well as private sector buildings, there are well north of 25,000 buildings that the SmartGate can potentially play in. And when you do the math on that, there's just a massive market opportunity.
Gotcha. I got a question here that says, is there an opportunity for stadiums and arenas?
Yeah, I mean, again, we've been limited. We created this market and we went direct. So we went direct where the easiest sales were, where the obvious markets were. I mean, when you ask the question you just asked, and then you go back to what I still think is one of the craziest ones, water treatment plants. And we've had really good acceptance there. It's because we haven't been able to contact those people. We haven't had the sales coverage. So I'm blanketing the answer to really with the partners that we're working with now and the ones that we'll continue to cultivate, we'll get into additional verticals that we never would have gotten before because they already have the existing relationship and they're looking for new solutions for those target markets. So the answer to your question is yes, and yes to a bunch more too.
No doubt, no doubt. Yeah, basically almost any sizable building that's got electricity coming in is a potential client.
Yep.
The way I see it. Yeah. Okay, it says SmartGate corrects, quote unquote, corrects voltage that comes in from the grid. Does SG SmartGate correct power coming in from the grid in other ways?
Yeah. So again, what we're primarily doing is we are primarily addressing voltage, but we're doing it in multiple ways. When you look at your traditional three-phase services that are coming in, each phase has its own individual voltage rating. So what we're actually doing on a cycle by cycle basis, and there's either 50 or 60 cycles per second, depending upon what part of the world that you're in, we're evaluating it. And what we're doing is we're calculating the difference between what's actually coming in and what the ideal voltage and what the correction needs to look like. We're actually rebuilding the waveform and we're ejecting it in real time to do that. So a good way to think of it as noise canceling headphones. The way that works is that you've got a microphone that's listening for what you don't want to hear, and it's creating the inverse sound wave of that, and it's injecting it into your speaker so that you don't actually hear it. And we're doing the same thing with electricity. So we're taking that. If you look at the standards, it's plus or minus 10%. So on a 600 volt standard, that obviously means that you can go from 540 to 660 and still be okay, but your equipment is never gonna be reliable that way. Right. So when you look at the nameplate rating on most of the equipment is somewhere in the 570, 575 range. We can take that voltage and pin it at 575, and it doesn't matter if it's going to give you 550 or 620. We're going to make sure that it gets that 575 on each phase individually. So this way we're getting that ideal operating environment. So yes, we are focusing on voltage, but we're doing it in a lot of different ways. We're taking out the sags of the swells, the transients, the over voltage. We're correcting power factor, phase imbalance as we go. So yes, there's a very powerful solution there for sure.
And again, the platform we have, not only what Mike just said is for today, but things that are unforeseen today that will be problems tomorrow, because we're getting all that data in from the insights, we can proactively look at opportunities in the future. And our platform, because it is software based, we can download and upgrade the platform. We're not just a product anymore. We truly are an intelligent platform.
Absolutely. I'll take one more question here, and then we'll start to wrap up because we're running out of time here. There certainly were more questions than I expected here, but last one: does the application need to be modified in any fashion based on the type of building? Would broad expansion cause any product disruption, or does one size fit all?
Yeah, so every building is different, and that's part of the assessment with the tool with insights, because I guess the way to look at it is, look at it as a product line of cars, and they have different size engines and things in them. That's the same as what you have with the SmartGate platform. I think there's over 80 different iterations of the SmartGate options that you can have. And it's getting more and more with some of the new feature sets we have. But for example, something as basic as the transformer size, which is the engine of the system, is decided upon by the profile of the building's power, etc. So if you look 5 years ago, our largest system was a 1500 amp. IKEA needed a 4000 amp. All that was driven, and all those, the functionality system is the same, but the size of the engine's larger. I'm trying to make it very general, but the answer will be that we do match up the appropriate building, and a lot of our clients have multiple size systems, although they all work the same, roughly look the same. They'll have a different size engine, if you will, in each of them, potentially, to reflect the requirements of the building.
Right. Gotcha. This has been fascinating. I seem to learn a lot every time I do interviews like this, but why don't, I don't know if I've missed anything. This is usually near the end where I let you guys leave a parting message or a key takeaway that you want the listeners to walk away with. Why don't we do that? Give us your parting message for everybody.
I'll let Mike go first, and I can wrap up.
Yeah, so we're at a real inflection point. When you look at the expansion of our platform, you look at what it is that we can do, you look at the expansion of our capabilities and the way we go to market, and the way we engage with customers, and how profoundly different our customers are engaging with us today than just a few years ago. It's a totally different Legend Power. And when you combine that with the fact that there's going to be $3 to $3.5 trillion a year spent for the next 20 to 30 years on trying to take carbon out of the economy and stabilize the electric grid, Legend Power is incredibly well positioned to make an amazing contribution to all of those efforts.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, it's rarely in business do you see the macro game set up for you for the win. And I thought it was interesting when Biden did his inauguration speech, and he talked about programs to improve electrical consumption in commercial buildings. And I'm sitting there listening to that thinking, wow, that's us. We hear it every day, and I get the Globe and Mail, and it used to be once a month I get an article. It's every other day there's something. Even the budget I saw while we're sitting here, there's a little corner, you get the little news update, and all about electrical energy, et cetera, and building efficiencies. That's happening more and more and more. It's real. Governments are funding these things. It's not legend saying anymore. We're being pulled along. As Mike said, I mean, we've got great solutions today, but the most important thing is the market and the world's changing for us, the acceptance. And we're talking to the executives now, not people in the electrical room. And that level of engagement is really starting to show signs. And we're really, really excited about where we're going. And we think we're a great value today. And we're excited about where we think the company will be over the next 2-3 years.
Fantastic. Randy, when we were on last, about 10 months ago, you said to look forward to a really strong and exciting year. I mean, you certainly delivered. I'm going to assume that we've got another good year ahead of us as well. I want to congratulate you guys, both of you, on a successful year and what you've managed to do with the business. And certainly I want to thank you guys for joining us today. We've been speaking to CEO Randy Buchamer and Michael Cioce of Legend Power. Guys, I'm looking forward to the next time we catch up.
Sounds great. Thank you, Paul, for facilitating, and Trevor, and we look forward to sharing more positive news next time we chat.
One more question. If somebody wants more information, what's your website address?
Legendpower.com.
There you go, legendpower.com. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you
Have a
all
good
very
one,
much.
everybody.
Appreciate it.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye now.